Let's start the tour by telling you about our experience at the border. Now, our friends who often go to Palestine warned us about the border experience. They said it would be tough, that they would interrogate us, that they would have us wait for hours before they let us through, etc., etc. But I'm not gonna lie, our experience was okay. Mainly because we were a group made up of 3 different generations. My parents, me and my siblings, and my less than 1-year-old niece. We looked like a harmless family, so they let us through easily. But you should note that they gave back my parents and my niece's passport right away, but kept mine and my 3 other siblings for a little longer. They got their passports back, but then me and my siblings didn't. They made us wait, and they were like, empty your pockets, and I don't know what. I think they were doing like some background checks and whatever. And I was so nervous that they wouldn't let me in because of all the pro-Palestine posts that I post in my poems on YouTube and stuff. I was like, I'm not gonna be allowed in my own country. But we made it! Having said that, although our experience was okay, our friend's experience wasn't. She is also a Canadian who came flying from Toronto to Tel Aviv, and she came by herself. We were supposed to be meeting her there. They gave her a horrible time, both when she was entering the land and exiting back to Canada. They kept her in a waiting room along with other young people of color for hours. They interrogated her, asking her about her dad and the rest of her family. They asked her where her dad was born, and she said, here in Palestine, to which the Israeli woman responded angrily with, what did you say? And our friend just sarcastically said, oh, I'm sorry, I mean Israel. Is that better? According to our friend, there was a brown guy in the waiting room taking a video of the situation everyone was in. And when the security lady asked him why he was taking a video, he said, oh, I just think it's interesting what you're doing here. And she completely flipped her attitude and politely said, oh, you know, it's just protocol. This was on her way in. On her way out of Palestine, they searched her bags and messed everything up inside. They kept her and interrogated her for hours and hours. That's the typical experience you go through if you're young and a person of color at the border. We basically covered all of Palestine, both occupied and non-occupied, except for Gaza in less than 5 days. The difference between both sides is unbelievable. Without the checkpoints, you can easily tell when you're in the occupied territories and when you're not. They even had these huge red signs for Israeli citizens warning them against entering certain areas because it's dangerous for them since Arabs mostly live there. As if we were some sort of wild species that are a danger to the human race. No such warnings for the Palestinians though from the Zionists. In the occupied territories, they had soldiers everywhere with their machine guns, just watching our every move, making sure no one was making any trouble.
Here they search us, the Israelis. Like they do like hardcore searches. Look at that.
They had less resources, buildings looked worn down, they didn't have like malls or big lights, fancy cars or anything. At night it looked like a ghost town. It looked like a developing country.
No one reacted to the light going out except us. Because they're probably used to it.
On the other hand, you can see the occupied territories. They look like big cities in the West. They have big, well-known brands everywhere. Ads, fancy wide roads and fancy lights, fancy buildings and restaurants, malls, beaches, touristy places, no soldiers marching back and forth. It looked like Toronto or New York City. It looked like a developed country. Now, I haven't been to Gaza, but based on the news, you can tell that it's basically like a war zone there. They don't have access to clean water, they're often denied medical care, there's constant back and forth firing and constant random house searches and arrests. Again, I haven't been there, so I honestly don't know, but I'll tell you this. I've been close to Gaza. I went to Hebron, also known as Khalil, and it's just not pretty. It's like what you typically see in the news, but I'll get into that later. I want to take a minute to talk about the story of the Palestinian traitor. This is a story that Palestinians in Jerusalem were telling us about. I can't tell you if it's 100% true, but it's the story that we were told by many over there. Property in Jerusalem is very sacred. If you're a Palestinian who owns land in Jerusalem, it's not considered fully yours. It's considered every Palestinian's land. You're not allowed to sell your house to an Israeli in Jerusalem unless you get every single Muslim person's signature on the planet. That's 1.8 billion signatures. Israelis, as we already know, would literally kill for the land there because it's so valuable and beautiful. So, a Palestinian trader sold his house to an Israeli for $30 million for just a 90-meter square house. That's a lot of money for a tiny space, but that's how valuable the land is there to Palestinians. A week later, his friend wanted to take the money from him, so he shot him. But the money wasn't with him. Now, there are inconsistencies in who killed him and why, but when he was killed, they took him to the Aqsa Mosque to pray over his body, and not a single imam agreed to do it. And in fact, the Palestinians refused to have him even buried in Jerusalem, so they had to do it outside Jerusalem. And now, just for the sake of boiling our blood, those Israeli owners display a huge Israeli flag on the house for every single person to see. It certainly was the first thing we noticed when we stepped foot into Jerusalem, and the first thing we asked about. And that was the story we were told when we were there. So, the lesson here is, don't be a traitor. Lastly on this episode, I want to give you a quick tour of our hometown, Shab Amer. We went to my grandfather's house, and we found an old Palestinian lady living there by herself. Of course, before the occupation, it belonged to my grandfather, but now, the house is the property of the Israeli government. Even now, with our Canadian passport, we cannot buy it back because the Israelis don't want the original owners to get back their homes. Some of our relatives stayed behind in Palestine though. My grandfather fled because he was wanted by the Zionists, but the rest of the Khalids remained and now carry an Israeli passport. Now enough of me talking. Enjoy the rest of this episode by taking a look at my hometown, the occupied side and the Palestinian side.
This is Syria, that's Jordan, and we are in Palestine. Look how generous us Palestinians are. Free coffee, free dessert, free juice, free مقبلات, appetizers that we have wiped. يعني على الأقل عرفت order the We're enjoying كنافة ناعمة, team ناعمة 1.
You want shad?
Some corn,
No, actually.
ترمس من الفول, شاي بنانا with the family.
We need one, واحد كمان لو سمحت.
This is the rock that lifted our Prophet Muhammad ﷺ into the seven skies. Inside the dome of the rock